appreciated that, and it was just again an eye-opener for me to know again what really happens in this dark world. And I just want to commend you, Brad, for what you do, and God bless you as you continue to strive forward and make a difference in the kingdom. That's what it's really all about. I was thinking this morning when Brad was sharing how Jesus just continues to be a deliverer. He never sleeps. He never slumbers. He's always there. We're thinking about how when you have a sports game, when you have a game of baseball, and the batter scores and there's a lot of cheering, or even when there's a touchdown in football. But that cheering is something that's very temporal. But this morning, I want to emphasize this morning that Jesus always scores. He never loses. And we're on that winning side if we choose to be on that side. And I'm thankful for that opportunity this morning to be a part of His kingdom. That we can worship Him and we can encourage each other as we go through different phases of life. I'd like for you to stand with me. As a prayer, we're going to sing Spirit of the Living God. And I just would like for you to sing this as a prayer. Whether you want to close your eyes, raise your hands, and we'll sing it one time through. Marlon, can you start that? Living God, fall afresh on me. Spirit of the living God, fall afresh on me. Melt me, mold me, fill me, use me, Spirit of the living God, fall afresh on me. Father, I thank you for your Spirit, and I just pray that it would continue to move among us, and it would touch every heart, that every need that is here this morning would sense and feel your presence. In the name of Jesus, amen. You may be seated. We talk about how Jesus is a deliverer and a warrior. It made me think of the Psalms 23, where it talks about how Jesus is our rod and our staff. And the rod indicates something as a protector, and how he uses the rod to protect us and to deliver us. And then he goes, like Brad was saying, there's a very, very important part of our body is our eyes. Now I realize there's some people that are legally blind, but I am convinced this morning that you can be legally blind yet spiritually seeing, and you can be able to see what God's love is. There's a few things I'd like to point out about our vision and our eyes that just fascinated me when I was studying this. And I don't know if you're all familiar with the term of tunnel vision. When somebody has tunnel vision, it's basically you're looking through like a tunnel, and all you can see is basically straight ahead of you. There's another one that's called peripheral vision, where that is what you get tested for when you go for an eye exam, how good your peripheral vision is. And that means that I could be standing here without moving my head, and I can see movement on both sides of me. And most of the time, it's on a straight 90-degree angle out. Now that's really, really good vision if you can do that. But as your peripheral vision gets narrow, it comes into tunnel vision. And I would suggest this morning that we for sure want to go towards the side of peripheral vision where we can see out either way. A person who has tunnel vision spiritually is very closed-minded, and he only is focused on what's ahead of him, and it's a lot of a me-centered type of vision. There's a couple of scriptures that I'd like to point out where it talks about our eyes. There's about three of them I'd like to pull out and then focus on the last one here. But just a couple of quick comments on Acts chapter 26, verse 17 and 18. I want to turn to that. And this is an account where Paul was, he was struck down, and he was telling his testimony to the people that he was speaking to here. And this is what he said, that Jesus told him. He said, in verse 18, he says, I'm going to go up to 16. Now get up and stand on your feet. I have appeared to you to appoint you as his servant and as a witness of what you have seen of me, and I will show you. I will rescue you from your own people, from the Gentiles. I'm sending you to them to open their eyes and turn them from darkness to light. That was the purpose of what Jesus had told Paul that his assignment is, that he would be able to show the people what it is like to turn from darkness into light. Thank you. Another one is in Ephesians 1, verse 18. And I turned to that scripture as well. And there again, it's Paul addressing the Ephesian church. And this is what he said. He says, I pray also that the eyes of your heart may be enlightened, in order that you may know the hope to which he has called you, the riches of his glorious inheritance in the saints. And here Paul is telling them that your eyes and your heart would be enlightened, that you'll be able to see what God has for us. Sometimes we just need to open our eyes and really see what God has and what he's doing. Another account, a very interesting account in 2 Kings chapter 6, where King Aram sent an army by night against Elisha. Very interesting story if you want to go and read that sometime. It says when the servants got up in the morning, when Elisha's servant got up in the morning and they went out, and he's seen this army with lots of horses and chariots that were surrounding the city. And he says the servant despaired. And of course he did, as he was looking at the huge army around him. And this is what Elisha's response was. It says, those who are with us are more than those who are with them. And Elisha prayed that God would open his eyes, open the servant's eyes. And all of a sudden the servant's eyes were open, and the hills, it says, were full of horses and chariots and fire all around them. So sometimes when I think of what some things that we may go through, it may seem like there's nothing here. What is it where is God? Sometimes I think it's just good for us to pray that, God, open my eyes. Open my eyes that I may see where you are and what you are doing. And I think there's probably a lot of us that have different stories of angels, how they interceded, and how angel stories are interesting. And I'm sure a lot of you would have stories how you felt that God protected you at a certain time, or God was with you, or an angel spared you. I remember particularly one time from my life when, and this would have been a few years back, I remember I was sitting on my chair in the morning and I was reading, and it was just before it was time for me to go. I all of a sudden got this really heaviness in my heart that, I really need to pray that God would protect me today. And it was so real that I can still feel it. It's just like it would happen yesterday. And I was like, what does this all mean? But I did ask God that, God, whatever I'm doing today, I pray that you would go with me and you would protect me, whatever it is. Well, I went on a job that morning, and I looked at the job, and I got back in my vehicle, and I went down the street. And this was a street that was down, it was a slope, a slight slope, and it was come to a red light. And it was one of these intersections where there was a red light, and about 150 feet, 200 feet, there was another one. So the light turned green for me to go. And I was just getting ready to go when I glanced to the side, and here was this big SUV, probably seeing the green light coming from that she had, but she would have had to stop at the light where I was at, blew right through the red light. And that was on a grade as well. That morning I was convinced that I knew why God had reminded me to pray for protection. And there's so many things, and I'm sure even the stories that we heard this morning, There's so many God moments and angel stories that happen in those types of situations. Open my eyes that I may see. I think it's a prayer that we need to pray for our lives continually, daily, that God would open our eyes that we may see what he has for us. The next verse is in Psalms 119, 17 to 24, and this is where the message came out of. I'd like to read that. Let's turn to that. Psalms 119. Psalms 119, I'm going to start in verse 18 and read to 24. Open my eyes that I may see the wonderful things in your law. I am a stranger on earth. Do not hide your commands from me. My soul is consumed with longing for your law at all times. You rebuke the arrogant who are cursed and who stray from their commandments, from your commandments. Remove from me scorn and contempt, for I keep your statutes. Though rulers sit together and slander me, your servant will meditate on your decrees. Your statutes are my delight; they are my counselor. Now here's a verse that really kind of jumped out at me a few weeks back, where it says, "Open my eyes that I may see the wondrous things from your law." Now, what's the wondrous things? What are the wondrous things that that David's speaking about here? And is it possible that we miss those wondrous things that God is doing for us, that are all around us, because we have too much of a tunnel vision? And I think I'm talking to myself here as well. I was just really convicted when I was studying this, how too often I am so self-centered, focused. I have one thing in mind, and I have a tunnel vision, and I forget what's all around me. So I think it's important that we ask God to open our eyes, and our perspective will change. Our outlook in life changes, even though our circumstances may not always change, but it definitely gives us a different outlook. And I think it's important that we recognize that there's two kingdoms, that we're not fighting against flesh and blood, but against principalities, against powers, against the rulers of darkness of this world, and against spiritual wickedness in high places. So my challenge to you this morning is that every day, I'm including myself, should be a day that this is the day the Lord has made. Let us rejoice and be glad in it. I'd like to share with you a story. There was a man and a family living in South Africa. And he worked and lived on his own little farm. He had a plow and an ox and a mule and a few other pieces of equipment that he worked the ground with. And he had quite a few acres, but on these acres were lots of rocks, lots of them. So on his farm, there was this small cabin that was tucked away in the corner of his farm where he and his family lived. So as they worked the ground, they grew the crops, and they sold these crops as they were ready to sell. And he would take the crops to the market. This is basically how he made a living. He was considered a man that had a decent living. He worked very hard. Everything was done by hand, remember, and there was no power equipment. One day a man came by, a priest they say, and noticed how hard this man, actually was not a priest here, it was a man that came by and noticed how hard this man worked, and he told the man that it's a shame that you work so hard, because there's got to be an easier way for you. And that moment, the seed of discontentment was sowed in this man's life. The stranger told the man, he said, you should go to India, and they have discovered that there's diamond mines in India. There's a place called the Valley of the Moon, and he said it's between two mountains that there runs a river, and all you have to do is scoop your hand into the water and pull out these diamonds the size of rocks. It sounds like a scheme, doesn't it? Well, this man had a desire to do something better, and he was told that he's going to become very rich if he goes. And as weeks and months went by, this man kept thinking about this river with the diamonds, and he kept thinking about how hard he has to work, and all these diamonds are back there in that river. And he kept plowing these rocky fields, and finally he decided this is enough. Enough of these rocks. So he said he sold the farm, He told his wife and family that he's going to go and to find some of those diamonds and that he'll be back with a fortune. And he will never have to work hard again. Says he kissed his wife and children goodbye. Consider it a true story. He took most of the money that he had made on the farm and left. He went over to India and he searched and searched and searched and found no diamonds. The man became very depressed and discouraged. Aside, as they were a real annoyance to him. Acres of them. One day he noticed a rock that just looked a little different. And when the sun hit it, he noticed the different colors. And he took it into the house and just set it on the shelf. He just thought, this is kind of a cool rock. I'm just going to set this on the shelf. Weeks later, the priest from the community came by, and as they were visiting, all of a sudden the priest stopped in mid-sentence. Said his mouth dropped open, and he looked at the rock and he said, "Where did you get that?" The man told him, he said, the man who was complaining about the rocks, and he said, "It was in my field, and I have so many of them. They're just they annoy me so much, and there's so much in the way that he has to keep getting off of his plow and throwing them to the side." The priest told him, said, "You don't understand that the rock that you have is a diamond." And they took it somewhere to get it analyzed and discovered it was worth $25,000 in the 1800s. And that's millions today. It later became searching for wealth and for an easier life was actually sitting on top of acres of diamonds. The man who threw himself into the raging water and took his own life never knew what he was living on top of all these days, all his years that he was there. Open my eyes that I may see. And I think it's important how we view God's blessings that God gives to us. And sometimes for myself, I take it so much for granted of what God does for us that I miss it. I miss the blessings that God really has for us. And we get into the tunnel vision, and we only see things straight ahead of us. And we forget that there are acres of diamonds all around us. It's a me-centered life. When you think about the blessings that God gives us, you start writing them down, you can't count them. And I particularly thought about, especially when I was studying this, of how God has blessed me in so many ways. And so many times I take it for granted. Just for an example, my wife and my children. Tremendous gift that God gives to us. Yet so often for myself, I take it for granted. And I understand that there's some things sometimes there's some hard things that we go through in life. And sometimes it's hard to have the peripheral vision that we really need as we go through those dark tunnels in life. And I would say this, that those are probably the times that we need friends to walk alongside of us and to encourage us and to weep with those who weep and to walk alongside and be a blessing to them. And I think it's when we don't see things coming down the road is what leads us to discouragement. And I understand, I'm very much aware today too about the fact of the losses that we've had here in church over the last year and a half. Very keenly aware of that. And those are difficult times to walk through. But I want to encourage each one of us here this morning that as we go through those difficult times, and we see a person that's walking through life with a tunnel vision and needs encouragement, let's be there for them. Let's be there to understand them and to help them walk through the difficult things that God has, that they're walking through. Another story about there were some sailors who were out on sea, and they ran out of fresh water. They got lost on on sea, and they ran out of fresh water. And there were about 3 days that they were without any water. And they were getting very, very desperate to find water. And as a ship went by, they were waving their hands and trying to get their attention and said, "I need water." And the ship kept going. And then finally there was another one that came by, and they were very, very desperate and did a lot of whatever they needed to do to get this ship's attention. And they were telling them that, "I need water. We're lost and we need water here." And the sailors from the other ship just hollered out across the water and said, "Drop your buckets in the water." And of course, they were sure that it was going to be salty water. And they actually did drop their buckets down into the water and discovered that it was fresh water. And here what happened is, it was right along the powerful Amazon River that comes down into the coast there. And it's actually saying this is what happens is the river is so powerful that it pushes the fresh water out, and being that fresh water is heavier than salt water, it stays above the salt water, and it literally pushes the fresh water out into the ocean about 200 miles. And this is where this ship was stranded. And the whole time they were thirsty, the whole time they thought that this was it, fresh water was right beneath them. "Open my eyes that I may see your goodness and your faithfulness." And I think it's important that we remember that Jesus is that well of fresh water, and let's draw from it. And let's let our buckets down and draw from it. When the woman came to Jesus at the well, this is what Jesus told her. He said, "Whosoever drinks of this water will thirst again, but whoever drinks of the water that I shall give him will never thirst." Never thirst. "But the water that I give him will become in him a fountain of water." Not just something that's running, but it's a fountain. It springs up into everlasting life. I really want to encourage you this morning, don't miss those diamonds that God has for you. They are all around you. Don't miss that fresh water that's just right below you. And all we need to do is tap into it, and we can have resources beyond our measure are there for us. Maybe we need to go and get an eye exam. And I know I wear glasses, and sometimes I need to go get an eye exam every couple of years. And they take this thing in my eye, and I don't know if any of you were ever in an eye doctor, but it's one of the worst things that I don't like about an eye doctor, where they take it and they put this little puff of air right into you're not supposed to blink. Well, that is to test what my vision is really like, is what it is for. And I think sometimes for us as Christians, maybe we should get our eyes examined. And let's not forget that what God has given us is way beyond our that we can even expect. Brad mentioned the fact about he could never, in a million years, even dream about what God had for him, the position that he has. That's God. That's who he is. He's not a God of scarcity, but he's a God of an abundance. And I just want to encourage you this morning that to allow God and ask God. I think it's important that we ask him to open my eyes that I may see the wondrous things from thy law. God bless you as you continue to walk where God has you to walk. And as you go forward in life, when you see people who are struggling and hurting, let's walk alongside of them, and let's be an encouragement to them. And let's have that